Assalamualaikum, man Zachary Latudu, why Samaturu Wolf, moi coach Parmafal. Ba aksi ngenchi jam, Dr. Gadio, agni nga andon joge Senegal. Aksi lenchi jam chi dukabi, ag sunu dara bukawe bu Boston. Amna mbegte di nuyu sunugan, Dr. Cheikh Tijan Gadio. Nga bache nu hamham ag ai wachtan yu am injayin ti imbiru digante ag juflante reuyi. Sunuho sed nagui dirige.
Well, yes, that was, well, I don't know, Zachary Gurston? AKA Coach, yes. Yes, AKA Coach Bamafal, that's right. Of course, he spoke well, and Dr. Gadio seemed to be appreciative of that. Okay. All right. So, of course, well, Coach will be one of the panelists a little later today, and we'll hear his experience. I think it's quite interesting. All right, I won't take too much time to introduce Dr. Gadio to you. First of all, because many of you know him, maybe more than I do. But let me just say that as yesterday when somebody asked me to introduce him, for some reason I remembered that among his many titles, one that really jumped out at me was that he was the head of the Council of Foreign Affairs Minister for the whole of the continent, meaning 53 countries. That's over 1 billion people, almost as big as China. And I realized, wow, that's more people than the U.S. Secretary of State represents. And of course, he was the top African diplomat at the African Union for many years. And in total, he spent 9 years at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Senegal. And someone who should know, because he's an academic, like Dr. Gadio himself, said he is the best foreign minister of Senegal ever, I think. And, but Dr. Gadio, as you also know, is an accomplished man of many talents and many careers. Throughout his life, he's excelled at many things. Certainly, after his studies, the final part of those studies was a PhD he earned at Ohio State University in this country, which means that he is fluent in English and he can articulate his thoughts better than I could, certainly. But he is a learned man, but also an active man and an activist even on some issues, and has worked on many of these issues. And I think if you look at African foreign policy, for better or worse, over the last 10 years, most issues have had something to do with Dr. Gadio. Whether it's African women's rights and the Maputo chart, then he worked on that. In Madagascar, he worked on the crisis. In Cote d'Ivoire, and I think one man from Cote d'Ivoire said to me one day, you know, we know Gadio better than you guys do in Senegal. I said, oh, really? He said, oh, yeah. And then I looked back, and yes, Dr. Gadio was instrumental in the initial attempts to settle peacefully the imminent crisis in Cote d'Ivoire. So that kind of diplomatic, let's say, efforts had really helped on the continent to at least keep a lead on some of the most urgent and some of the most intractable conflicts. But Dr. Gadio is first and foremost an academic, which means a man of ideas, and a man with the ability to articulate those ideas, and in his case, the ability to execute. And he has executed in many different places, certainly starting from the United States all the way to Senegal. I do not want like a sound like, I do not want to sound like a griot. Oh yeah, because I'm not one. Those of you who know me know that I'm pretty straightforward and I can tell it the way it is. But Dr. Gadio is a man who deserves our support for whatever he does because he sincerely has the interest of Africa at heart. That's how I met him. And that's the kind of dialogue I had with him. It had nothing to do with personal ambition, his or mine for that matter. My ambition is not in Senegal. My ambition is to go to heaven. But he certainly has a level of commitment to good governance, to clarity, to transparency, and to democratic rule. And very few politicians in Africa, I'm not going to say just Senegal, in Africa, have. Because his understanding of those principles goes beyond politics, especially on a day-to-day basis. He has a firm philosophical grasp of those issues. And I thank him for that intellectual capacity, that ability to say, let's lay down the problems. We may come down on different sides of the issue, but let's at least clarify what those issues are and clarify our approach to those issues. We may disagree at the end, but that intellectual exercise is in itself as powerful, as necessary, as the solution that we have or don't have at the end. So anyway, let me I think Councilor Yancey is here, and I know Councilor Yancey has many things to do, and Councilor Yancey has a surprise for Dr. Gadio. So Dr. Gadio, I'd like to call you up to the podium here. Certainly so that many who haven't seen you up yet could do so, but also to have a meeting with our dear Councilor Yancey. Dr. Gadio. Thank you.
Of course, those of you who have seen me in the city of Boston before know that I try to recognize as many important and prominent people in the world and in our city as I can, and certainly this is a great man in our midst. And I will not read the entire resolution because we're anxious to hear from Dr. Gadio. So what I will do, with your permission, Dovie, is abbreviate this so we can go ahead and we can hear the person we came to see. All right. Whereas Dr. Gadio served as Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Senegal, West Africa, from the year 2000 to 2009, and whereas Dr. Gadio has been a key player in African diplomacy and outspoken supporter of the unification of Africa and the creation of a United States of Africa. And whereas Dr. Gadio's previously held positions with the World Bank, the United Nations, the European Commission, the U.S. Africa Institute, and the School of International Training. And whereas Dr. Gadio last year launched a new political movement, the Citizens Political Movement in the Republic of Senegal. And whereas Dr. Gadio's visit today, October 23rd, 2010, to deliver the keynote speech at an academic forum entitled Challenges and Advances in Higher Education in Africa, which is being held at the Boston University College of Communications. Be it therefore resolved that the Boston City Council and meeting assembled congratulates the Honorable Dr. Gadio for his work to unify African nations, and be it further resolved that the Boston City Council and meeting assembles welcomes the Honorable Dr. Gadio to the City of Boston, and that the City Council proclaims October 23rd, 2010 as Dr. Gadio Day in the City of Boston. Welcome. Thank you very much, and what I didn't mention is that you may be looking at the next president of Senegal. And to remind those of you who live in Massachusetts, don't forget to vote November 2nd for